I'm rather new practitioner, and I have two questions. I did a metta meditation to someone, and it really works. And I just like to know, how does this metta meditation work? How can it transmit from my recitations and thoughts to this person? And we were in a different country then, and it works. So I was like, wow.
If you ask me how it works, actually I don't know. Very simple, easy answer. I just really don't know. So when you said it works, obviously it's different for different people. Maybe I understand it. You weren't feeling well, or they weren't feeling so good, or you had some argument and you did metta meditation and they felt better. Is that when you said it works? I don't know what happened.
His behavior changed. Behavior is very difficult to change. It just changed suddenly after I did 3 days metta meditation.
Yeah, if you ask me, it's difficult because one thing is that, just to tell everybody, it doesn't always work like that. And so sometimes you seem to experience the results in this way of something like metta meditation. But really, for me, metta meditation is much more about the practitioner. It's much more about you and your mind or your heart. You know, the idea of us being like metta radiators, like beaming good vibes across the world. That's how we kind of think it through, you know, and that's the practice, especially we do it to ourselves first. You're generating a feeling of well-being to oneself. And there is a power in the mind. That much we would definitely acknowledge within oneself. There's nothing special about that. You dedicate your mind in a certain way and you feel a certain way. Then regarding other people, I think it can really depend. I mean, generally we have you could say a belief, or it seems to be the case that the mind has a certain power, the mind, that thoughts, you know, in the same way that love, when you see people, you feel how they are, your emotions can influence other people, these things. So we don't need to analyze it. How does it work? We don't need to ask that question because nobody can really answer it. And you don't need to worry. And again, maybe it works sometimes, maybe it doesn't work. I like to focus on your practice as being like your practice for you. Yeah, your practice, your well-being. Each of us as individuals. And the Buddha wasn't even teaching metta as a means of affecting other people. It's the Brahma Viharas. Yeah, you can practice them as a unit. Loving kindness, compassion, what's called appreciative joy, the happiness you get on account of somebody else. And equanimity means evenness or balance. They're like a unit. Metta is just one aspect. And I never really see it presented by the Buddha as a means of making somebody else happy or trying to, you know, make your husband or wife a nicer person or your son listen to you. You know, it may come out as a sort of side effect, but most importantly, it's something which you're doing for your own well-being. You have dosa, you have negativity. Dosa means it's the opposite of metta. You have dosa in your heart. You're feeling angry or negative. And you cultivate good feelings in yourself, in your heart. And you can spread it to other people, but as it's taught by the Buddha, you radiate or you direct your loving kindness to that person as a means of eliminating negativity in your own mind. It's never presented, I've never come across it, that in order to influence them in any way. So whether it works or doesn't work, I'm not disputing that. It can, you know, maybe the power of the mind, a real bond between two people when somebody really, really, really focuses and really wishes somebody well instead of wishing somebody negatively. Maybe they can feel it, and then the next time you talk, they seem nicer. But maybe it's because you've changed. Maybe the way you talk to them is nicer, or you've, you know, developed something that they can feel. So I think that's the more important point I would like to pick up. If we talk about metta, talk about it in the context of metta and compassion. Karuna, mudita means the ability to be happy on account of somebody else's happiness. Even if somebody, like imagine your competitors, they win, you know, they get a gold medal, you get a silver medal. You can feel happy, like, oh, that's so nice. They got the gold medal, you know. And that's part of then equanimity, when you don't really mind anymore. If they win, I win, doesn't matter. Somebody won, that's so nice. So, and the point is, it's a practice you do for yourself. This whole Dharma practice, of course, there's a lot of teachings about looking after mother and father and society, our duties, even the Buddha's advice to what a king should do in society. So there's a little bit of that, the way we relate to the people around us. But mainly it's about developing wholesome mind state in ourselves, because then we will be able to help people more and more. So that's what I would say. How metta works on the kind of long distance level, I'm not really sure. And there's no guarantees as well, so don't think. And if you try and radiate metta to somebody and they don't seem to change, don't think that you're not doing it right. It's not, as I understand, taught in that way, that it's a trick to make people nicer. So, what was your second question?
When someone passes away, what is the right ritual or chanting for the person? Or before the person passes away, on the last breath, and after the person passes away? In the Theravada ways.
Yeah, it's also an interesting question. In a way, there is no answer. We don't have rites and rituals in the way that other religions, or I've just watched a Brahmin or Hindu cremation ceremony for my father. It begins after death, usually the first or the second day. And then 31 days of prayers, and then on the 31st day you invite the Brahmins again, and you have kind of coconuts and flowers and bananas and incense and betel nut and all kinds of stuff, and then the thread. And it's very, very clear in their religion what chants they do and what rituals they do, and whether the person is usually the son. So that should have been me, but I'm a monk, so I wasn't doing the ritual. We had my cousin was standing in my place, wearing like kind of thread and then wearing the Indian clothes. And you take this with your left hand and you put it on your right hand and you do this 3 times. Everything very, very specific, you know, and say the name now and this prayer and that chant. We don't really have that. You said in the Theravada. So if we look in our scriptures, the Buddha had no instructions about what rituals to do. So this is a bit surprising for some people. We don't have that. What we have is traditions that we have developed over the centuries in different countries in different ways. Now, of course, some of them come from the earliest Buddhist times. So a typical chant which we chant when people die is anicca, vata, sankhara, upadavaya, tamino. Impermanent are all conditioned things. Their nature is to rise and fall. Upajitava nirujjanti, having arisen, things must cease. Te sangvupasamo sukho, their stilling brings true happiness. So this is an example of a chant that was there in the Buddha's time, chanted, I think even after his parinibbana. But it's not a rite or a ritual that you have to do to somehow help the consciousness or the person dying move on to a better place. We don't have that really. Again, we can share the merits, you can wish them well. So really, you can chant whatever chant you know. That's probably the best chant to chant. It could be itipiso, it could be butto, 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 it could be, anything. And then you invite monks. If you invite Theravada monks, we have our chanting that we do. Some come from later tradition, it's called Abhidhamma, many hundred years later. Some of them are earlier chants. You can chant suttas. It really depends on the situation, on the country. Theravada means Thailand, Myanmar, Burma, Cambodia, Laos, Sri Lanka. And every country has different traditions for the funeral and for the departed and for sharing merits. So which one is right? See, none of them are. You see, we don't have anything laid down because again, the real chant actually is Kama Sakomi, Kama Dayado, Kama Yoni, Kama Bantu, which means I am the owner of my action, heir to my action, born of my action, or born of my karma. It's the same for you, and it's the same for your dying relative, really. So But any of the chants are good. You could chant the Metta Sutta, any chant that you know. And it depends on them as well. If they were the Buddhist practitioner or practicing Dhamma, then maybe they like to hear Itipiso Bhagava Araham Samma Sambuddho in their ear when they are passing. That can help them, be peaceful. Because when people pass away, they can get very stressed. We like to think of passing as always very gentle, very nice, very peaceful, slowly. But it's not always like that. And even the last few days, maybe the person knows it's the end, then they get worried, then they get sad, and relatives get sad. So it depends on the person. That's why it's important to do chanting now in your lives while you're still healthy. Don't wait till you're dying to learn your chanting and to begin to practice chanting and to learn how to calm yourself and to be happy and feel the refuge of the triple gem. Like I said, Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. I bow to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. So it means that this is what I respect, what I revere, what I feel safe, what I feel happy. So if I'm dying, and then I have my friends, hopefully, Bhante Aradhamika and the others will be there. They know. There you go. Yeah. Come to look after me in my old age, and because he's younger than me. So, and if he just goes out, Itipiso Bhagava Araham Sama, I just lie, I feel, yeah. A reminder, it's okay. We have a refuge beyond this body. The monastery, my robes, my bowl, I can let go of it all. I don't have to worry about, what happens to it now. And the monks, the next generation, SBS team, I can just let go because we jarana sambano sugato loka we do. But if you're not familiar with that, you can't just go and chant Buddhist chants to somebody. It's like a new song or a new language. I don't know that one. Maybe it doesn't make them feel so... I'm kind of, it's funny, but I'm serious. Like, you should hear what you feel is relaxing, soothing. It's like, if it's not chanting, like when somebody's dying, like an old friend, somebody, or an old friend, old family, they come to the bed and say, hey, it's me, I've come. The person maybe in a coma or unconscious. It's soothing. Hey, I'm here. It's me, because it's an old voice from your childhood. You need the familiar, the old people. You need to feel safe. That's what you need when you're dying. And then the family and the relatives. So for you and for your family, the more you have this chanting in your family, then it makes people feel good. It makes people feel good. So when my father was passing away, I was doing chanting, Buddhist chanting, and then I have my sisters, my cousin, they're doing some Hindu chanting. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Very nice, very peaceful. And then some other chant, Shivaya Namaho, Shivaya Namaha. Very, very nice, very peaceful. And then she would get tired, then I would take over with some Buddhist chanting. It was just to make the atmosphere nice. Because my father liked chanting, and in his last few months, he's every day do dana, and I give the blessing. And so you get familiar with it, you feel good. So it's to everybody, I think it's important, it's good to do the chanting. We don't have really specific chants which we should do, like this one for dying, this one that were laid down in the texts. But we use the text now. Over the years, we've got a whole group of chants. Sometimes we do parita, the parita chanting, the blessing chanting. So it depends on the mood. Yeah. Okay.
The question I have might be a little bit on the sensitive side. It is regarding religion and sexuality. So, we all know that Malaysia is a pretty homophobic country, specifically regarding LGBT issues. And historically, throughout all the different countries in the world, we know there's a lot of fighting, debates going on, especially when it comes to religion and sexuality. So my question is this. So regarding Buddhism, what is this religion's stance towards sexuality? Kind of pertaining to earlier, Bhante, you mentioned about righteous speech, right? And you mentioned specifically between a man and a woman, or like a husband and wife. What about same-sex partners?
Well, I was referring to not righteous speech, but correct, like right sexual relationships, sexual misconduct, or refraining from sexual misconduct as one of the precepts. So as far as I understand, and as far as I've studied and seen in the texts and experience, yeah, Buddhism is, we could consider it a very liberal religion in these terms. There's nothing I know about prohibiting or speaking in any way against same-sex partners. And so the principles around sexual misconduct should be understood to mean engaging in sexual activity whereby you harm yourself and your sexual partner, or somehow are disloyal or dishonest to them in a way where they'll be hurt, or go against, and this is another subtle thing, everyone has to consider what the norms and values are in their family and in society. So of course in Buddhism we wouldn't say, well, you shouldn't have a same-sex relationship. But if, for example, it's illegal in that country, then of course anyone would say, well, you do have to be careful. You have to know what the risks are. Something like that, very pragmatic. But in terms of karma and Buddhism as a religion per se, as far as I know, there's absolutely no prescription or like forbidding or difference regarding, say, same-sex relationships. And you're probably aware that Thailand, which is a Buddhist country, it's interesting, it's quite homophobic actually, but it has this side which is just incredibly liberal. And it's always been very tolerated in Thai society and really acceptable, same-sex relationships. Although when you talk to gay people, they'll tell you, no, it's not really, it's always there's always two sides to the story. But there's no pressure from the religion, as far as I know. Yeah.
Hi, Bante. I would like to know that if someone is suffering from mental health, can they still practice meditation? Or is there a specific kind of meditation that's suitable for people who suffer mental health?
So, I mean, this is a very good question in general regarding mental health, not just metta meditation, but how to help people with mental health. One thing is that actually we all have mental health issues. You know, we all have problems. And I mean that it's funny, but seriously. It's just a question of how extreme and how dysfunctional we are. So, I mean, we're all here because we have mental health problems. And I think it's important point to acknowledge that why we should all be practicing Dhamma and practicing meditation, and you shouldn't feel guilty about going on retreats or taking time. It's because you're looking after your mental health. It's about mental wellness and all the areas, the issues in our lives. And so in just the same way that when you're physically sick, yeah, you need to take a break. When you're physically sick, you go to the doctor. When you're physically sick, you go to hospital. And nobody would say, why are you doing that? Why are you, It's the same with our mental health. This is what it's all about. It's mental wellness. Now, what we usually mean when we say like mental health problems or mental health issues is something whereby that person is, suffering like more than usual to a point where it's an issue in their lives. It's an obstacle to them functioning in their life and family life, and there are problems coming up. So the question is then, how can you help people? And then actually it varies. You can't just speak generally and say, well, somebody with mental health problems can meditate, or somebody with mental health problems shouldn't meditate. You can't answer so simply. I think there are definitely certain conditions which people have, whereby focusing inwards, even if it's something like metta, which is more discursive, it means you're creating, you're thinking, may I be well, may I be kind, visualize yourself. It may be that for some people, even that is too, disturbing, that there's too much within themselves, that they need some kind of external focus or distraction. And definitely for some people, doing anapanasati, breathing in, breathing out, is not beneficial for them. And if they do it a lot, they think it's good. All kinds of problems can arise and can get worse. So I just don't know. I can't say, it depends on the particular condition. But it would seem that, metta meditation done as just a way of just kind of thinking, don't have to call it meditation. Think about yourself, direct nice thoughts towards yourself. that for the right mental health condition or the right situation could be a very, very good way to help people. But I think you need to know what is the specific condition the person has, what works. And these days, these kind of techniques, mindfulness, loving kindness, they're being used more and more in, conventional mental health treatment. And so it's a question of trying a little bit and seeing what works and what can help the person. But sometimes people just can't, if their mental health condition is too much, or you could say their dukkha, their suffering, it's just too great, that they're not ready for even sitting down and thinking about themselves. If somebody hates themselves and their problem is a lot of self-hatred, it may well be that just to start by thinking of yourself in such a kind of focused way might trigger even more rage. So you don't think that the meditation or metta or Dhamma is like some cure-all pill that works for everybody. And one of the things that now people are learning in using these kind of practices in mental health treatment is that you have to be careful as to who is ready for meditation or mindfulness and these things. So I can't say, if you just speak generally like that, mentally, I can't really say. Maybe yes, maybe very good, maybe not right. It depends on the condition, depends on the person. But what I would say is we all have mental health problems, and so we all have issues. And in the same way that sexuality is not such a clear-cut issue these days, it used to be very clear-cut, we used to say binary. These days everything is very fluid. And it's right there in the Buddhist texts as well. We even have examples of spontaneous sex change and all kinds of things. And so it's all very, very fluid and very, very not clear. But what we know is that we're all experiencing this mental health, say, not crisis, but ups and downs. And so what we're doing is really looking at that directly and seeing how can we help ourselves primarily, and a little bit helping other people. But the Buddha was also very careful about, one person thinking they can help other people. In one very powerful line or teaching, he said that if somebody themselves is sinking in the mud, thinks they can pull out, tries to pull somebody else out of the mud, that's not possible. So we do have to be realistic as to, can we really help other people? First, you have to help yourself.
I'm asking on behalf of a very old person. We are talking about the 90s, who has not been religious at all her entire life, okay? Actually, it's my mom. So she has this worry that the children don't love her, the grandchildren don't love her, and so on. So for me personally, she's very old, okay? It can be any time that she will pass away. So my concern is I would like to have her have at least a peaceful passing, okay? So what I'm trying to do for her is I'm trying to tell her, teach her rather, whenever the occasion arises, because we all Chinese are quite pantang about talking about death. But when there is an occasion, I will try to tell her to think about the fact that all her children and her grandchildren are very successful. No, we don't need anything else. No, we are happy. We have our own lives. That's number one. Number two, I was telling her at the moment of passing, what you should think about is that there are some members of the family who really love you. And you just focus on that, It's not the whole family that is entire family that's no good. One or two who really love her, and she knows that they love her. So I'm trying to teach her to focus on that at her dying breath. Because I think that's all I can do to help her. Because it's a bit too late already. She's already done something. She has never been religious her entire life. If you talk about chanting and so on, she's not even interested. My auntie tried to give her the beads, and then just to do the Amitofo, Amitofo. She did it for a short while, and then she just don't want to do anymore. So I wonder if there's anything else I can do.
Gosh. So you said you're very pantang about talking about death? What did you say? What does that mean? Oh, superstition. Yeah, it's difficult. Yeah, a bit.
On her dying moment, she should focus on the people who love her. And she knows there are a few who really, really love her. dying breath. Okay. The second thing is to know that we are all okay. Without her, we are totally fine. To let go. In other words, to let go peacefully. I wonder if there's anything else I can do.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll just share a little bit personally, like the last few months, I spent 4 months with my father as he was dying. And I knew it was going to be maybe the end. So that's why I went very quickly before what we call the Vasa, the rains retreat in July. I didn't want to go just at the last week when you get the call, he's going fast. And mainly what I think was useful was just being present, being there, like a friend, like a buddy. And I wasn't talking religion, I wasn't talking Dhamma, I wasn't giving him advice, because also very difficult to talk about these things if somebody's not into it already and into this whole spiritual life and death and dying. So, and I think this is maybe common with a lot of people. Maybe we don't always have to sort of, give them the instructions, or you do this, and get it right. Again, it's a bit like, look, Kamasakum, your mother has her journey, has her way, and her life has reached this point because of mainly her actions. But just by being together and looking after, doing the physical things, I don't know how much physical care or nursing you're doing now, or she will let you do. But as it gets closer and closer and closer, it's sure, guaranteed, there will be more and more things that you do, and you can do it in a non-verbal way. It can just be like, physically looking after, washing, bathing, feeding, massaging, stroking. And I think that can just be so helpful, because people just need comfort. And then, obviously the family members who you say, really love her and she knows that, make sure that they're there as well. I think that would be, and it's nice, you can speak, you can just say, we really love you, Mum, we're going to miss you, and there's that kind of thing, just to make her feel loved. Because I think that's all people want. And of course you say, we're going to be fine, don't worry about us, and when it's really time to go, people are different. Some people, if you say, look, you just go, if they're not, it may not be what they want to hear, What do you mean, just go? Trying to get rid of me. I know, you've been waiting. It depends. In Thailand, you can say that, because there's so much of this culture of death and dying, and especially around the people I visit, they're usually disciples of the monastery. They say, don't worry, Mom, you can go, don't worry about us, whenever you're ready, And everyone understands, they've been talking like that for a long time. But in many families, it's not easy, it hasn't been the case. So you just have to hold it like a kind of, not a secret, but like a silent understanding. And it's very common sometimes, if you heard this one, that sometimes the family is all in the room, and the person then, they're waiting 1 day, 2 days, they're all there. And then suddenly there'll be one time when nobody's there, and the person will just go. Sometimes it really happens, maybe not a lot, but enough that it really seems like sometimes in these families where it's difficult to talk about death, the person just wants to be alone and doesn't want to talk about it, and just doesn't want that whole thing of like, don't worry, Mom, you can go. They kind of know that no one's there, and then they can just go. Because subconsciously, it's just let go. So it is mysterious how it works, but I think just being a good person, being there for your mother, with her, and it's difficult sometimes, and just definitely not making any more, issues, and being very harmonious with your siblings. Remember, the difficult thing when a parent is passing away, it can be these difficult decisions around what the medical treatment. Do you go to hospital? Do you do ICU? Do you do defibrillation? Do you want intubation, feeding tubes? All of these things, these are the difficult decisions. And sometimes it's the brothers and sisters that are arguing. One sibling wants the natural way, the other one says, look, we've got to do everything we can. Then maybe money problem, it's serious. Look, if we start this route, ICU, it can be like, how many thousand, it's serious. So you have to think about all of these things. And it's not easy to make those decisions in that stressful situation. So I think also very important, you want to help your mother, if there are children, like you have brothers and sisters, try to say, look, we've got to share this phase now. Let's really get a clear idea and be really harmonious, no arguing, no fighting, listening, deep listening. And also maybe listen to your mother, ask your mother and see what she has to say to you. You don't have to say, okay, any last words? But, in a way, you keep giving her the opening. Yeah, Mum, we're here. We love you, anything, that kind of thing. Then maybe she might start talking or might start. So I think just be a presence in her life. Like my friend here, send her the metta from your heart and see if it works. So my friend would ask.
Dying, there shouldn't be too many people crying all around the person. So I have already decided if any of my siblings start crying, because some of them are crybabies, I know them. So I will say, please go out, go out the room, cry until you are satisfied, and then come back in. Because to me, if I am dying and then people are crying all around me, I don't want to let go. I feel already sad and in pain, and then if you are still crying all around me, I think I would cling more, and I don't want that to happen. I would prefer she pass peacefully, and then, when you pass peacefully, there is more chance of you being reborn in a better plane, rather than clinging on and then die. I think that would be very bad. This is what I think anyway.
It's hard to know these things, which is really, really the best way. I mean, like I said, really important, keep the stress level and tension low with your siblings, because, you sort of kick somebody out of the room and then mother passes, she'd be angry with you for the rest of your life. So, be very gentle with everybody. It's hard to know. It's hard to know what's really the best way. But the more of a sense of harmony you all have, talk about it before, make sure it's clear that this is happening, and then you begin your grieving beforehand. Don't just sort of keep it all in, and then the last few days will be super stressful, super kind of explosion of emotion. Begin it now, just a long process, long fade out.
One day, the word happy is very subjective. You ask a drunkard, after drinking, they are very happy, So, like for example, in Satipatthana, we are taught to observe the feelings. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. And like in dependent origination, once you have contact, you have feelings. So, whereas like sometimes when you meditate, you reach a certain level, you have upekkha, which is, I don't know whether is upekkha a neutral feeling or not. So I just wanted to ask, in the Buddhist context, what's the precise definition of happiness? And is it actually associated with emotions or feelings? Or is it just generally the state of a mind?
I like to pass these technical questions on to my friend. He's much more learned than I am. I do the... No, I try and answer it in a simple way because, it's important to be able to, literally feel these teachings. I like to say, the line when we chant the Dhamma, the Itipiso Bhagavan, the Dhamma, we say, Paccatang veditabo vinyuhiti, and we usually translate it as to be experienced individually by the wise or to be experienced for oneself. But veditabo literally means to be felt. So the Dhamma should be felt. This Buddhism is all about feelings. And it's all about sukha and dukkha, happiness and suffering, or happiness and sadness, or suffering and the opposite. So I think it's important. You started by saying happiness is very subjective. That means it's a feeling you have. That means subjective means it's something which each person feels inside themselves, and that's their own feeling. You cannot say what means objectified. You cannot say that will give you that much suffering or that much happiness, this drink, because it depends on which person drinks it. So a drunk will maybe feel a kind of happiness which somebody like who doesn't like alcohol won't. Same product, same drink, different subjective experience. So I think the simpler way to answer this question is like this. Remember how the Buddha defines dukkha? Remember when he talking, so for example, not defines it, but the ways of explaining dukkha. It was, jati pi dukkha, jara pi dukkha, maran pi dukkha. It says birth is suffering, aging, death, suffering. And then he says, soka parideva dukkha domana supayasa pi dukkha. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, despair. So the Buddha is giving all types of different emotional experiences, which are dukkha, and anxiety, and stress, and dis-ease, and also the kinds of craving, wanting, you want this, you want that. It comes up again and again, all these types of emotions, or feelings, or thoughts are dukkha. But then when they're not there, there's a kind of happiness. There's the freedom from dukkha. So it can be anything from just very neutral, just sitting here and just not feeling. It's already moving away from dukkha. And then there are different types of sukha. There are the kind of sensual happiness, which we talk about. I get happy if I drink a drink and I like it, not a beer, not that kind of drink, like chrysanthemum tea. Sensual, sexual happiness in a way. But the Buddha then teaches us that, but actually the sensual desires, happiness from the sense realm, it can make you what feels briefly happy, but it comes at a cost. There will always be some dukkha associated. It's a bit subtle, a bit difficult to understand. And then there's the happiness we get, which we can feel, just different types of happiness. Like you look and you see your children. It's also sensual. You look, you see your children, but it's a different kind of happiness, a kind of love. And then there's a kind of happiness you get when you look at nature and you're just, and then you're just sitting, looking at the sky or something. We can learn in our lives. You should learn for yourself. What does this happiness mean? And you learn, understand, feel into it. Am I suffering now? Do I feel good? Do I feel bad? Is there tension? Is there anxiety? Am I nervous? Am I scared? And then you will also understand about happiness when these things are not there, generally, and you kind of feel like, okay. Like, I feel okay. And then different types of happiness. Again, the Buddha teaching you, you've got sensual, material happiness. If you want to talk about Satipatthana, the Buddha said, Sami sangwa sukhang vedanang vediyam. It means when there is happiness that comes from the sensual realm, the person knows, I'm experiencing happiness from the sensual realm. So it's a bit technical, but the Buddha teaching you how to be aware of these different types of things. And when there is a different type of happiness, happiness from meditation, or the happiness when you do dana, the happiness when you want to say something, you want to give somebody a scolding, and you don't give them a scolding, and you feel, that feels good. That's a different kind of happiness. So actually happiness itself is a very, very broad experience. But it's not something I think we need to necessarily get too technical about, start talking about paticca samuppada and contact and these things. Just learn about it in your lives. Ask yourself this year, like a nice challenge for this year or a project. What is happiness? Like, how do you experience happiness in your life? When do you experience it? Based on what causes? And what are the different types of happiness? Yes, you can be happy, like, having a gathering, a nice family dinner, birthday. It's a kind of happiness, but understand it in the context of also the dukkha that's there, So learning about sukha and dukkha is, I think, something we can all do for ourselves. Not too difficult. In Satipatthana, this is teaching on feelings, that section on feelings, that generally the Buddha said there's happy, pleasant feelings. That happiness is a type of pleasant feeling, that the emotional tone of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, when you see something and you like it. Then there's unpleasant, you see it, you don't like it. And then neutral, you see it, just, nothing special. And then specifically there's the happiness and the dukkha and the neutral based on the sense realm, and then also based on renunciant, giving up. Right? You know? You go to practice meditation in SBS or something. So if something's nice, like, wow, so beautiful, you know? And that's sensual, but you're giving up. And you look in, you meditate, you close your eyes, you turn off your phone, you don't speak, you don't eat in the evening. There's a kind of happiness, but maybe there's also dukkha from that as well. You're hungry in the evening, so you're observing all of these things. And you learn that our life has all of these things. And the first thing is, we said, observe, or pajanati, means he knows, or she really knows. You know these feelings. You begin by knowing them, and seeing how it works in your life. And slowly, slowly, slowly giving up the things which will lead to your dukkha, to your suffering. So, yeah, I think it's something you can figure out for yourself. And we don't need to get too technical. Okay, one more question. Two more, then 1 and 2, and then that's enough. Yes. Gentleman at the back.
Bhante, I have one question about dying. When a person dies, according to a certain Buddhist school, they say that we are not supposed to touch the dead body for a period of 8 hours or something like that. So my question is there such teaching in the Theravadian tradition? And if there is, under what sutta? Thank you, Bhante. My highest gratitude.
Okay. Yeah, so, well, simple answer, as far as I know, there is no such teaching in the Theravadan tradition. No sutta. Would you agree? Do you know? Yeah. Okay. Just check. Gotta check with the abbot. Abbot knows best. So yes, see this, it's like with the question about what chants do you do when somebody dies. We have no clear instructions about these things, because these things are not connected with an individual's journey towards happiness or freedom. You notice the theme in the questions, a lot of questions about dying. What to do, how do you die, what happens after death, traditions. See, there's a lot of, it's an important part of people's lives, even though actually it's the end of the life. So it just shows how every culture develops different ideas. Now this Buddhist school, I don't know what it is or why they have this tradition, where it came from. And I have no real comment on it. Because again, every Buddhist school or every religion, every country will have its traditions. You know, why? I know that Hindus, Muslims, they really want to bury or cremate on the first day. You know, it's very important, maybe for hygiene, maybe for whatever. In Buddhism, much more relaxed. Well, wait, when the relatives come, maybe pick the right day. You know, we don't have any fixed guidelines. But other Buddhist traditions, maybe for different reasons, have developed them. So we don't need to judge this belief as right or wrong. It's not good if they say this is the Buddha's teaching, because from what we understand, it's not. And it doesn't really matter. But different Buddhist schools also hold very differently to their rites and rituals and traditions. Some people hold very strongly. So that's part of every religion, this clinging, this must be this way, like this, like this, like this, like this, especially around ceremonies and rituals. But we don't have that. I'm very glad we don't have that, because it'd be very difficult if everything had to be very, very specific. So I would say, don't worry. I would say, no problem touching people when they died. You've got to wash the body, you've got to move the body, you've got to do everything. The body, you've got to put the things, you know, cotton wool, make sure the fluids don't come out. It's very important, in my opinion, just to look after the body straight away after passing. And if you're going to keep it, begin, if you can, the process of preserving very quickly for a few days. So I got no problem with touching the body before, during, and after death. So maybe last question for the evening, lady here.
Good evening, Bhante. May I know why in one of the sutta Buddha says woman is envious, miserly, unwise? Is that because based on the karmic factor or the cultural background at that time? Thank you, Bhante.
I just don't know. Good what? Good. How to be skillful here. It's hard to answer that kind of question, isn't it? Particularly in this day, it's always been hard. So all I can say is I think in that particular case, the Buddha is I just don't know, just drawing on certain character traits which can be there. Whether they're particularly more prevalent in women than men, I just don't know. So I can't answer really. I literally cannot speak for the Buddha. If you ask me, why did he say that? Was it for... I'm serious. Was it for karmic reasons? See, I really don't understand, and none of us can really understand the law of karma. And the Buddha said not to try and analyze or figure out the law of karma. So it's true, there are these kinds of teachings which you wonder, well, why? And it's certainly now in a period where, of course, it's important we're looking to present the teachings as more, equal and fair and not, represent women in a kind of inferior way, to have a list where you see women's negative qualities. It doesn't look good, doesn't look nice. So all I can say is, it may well have been, the Buddha was teaching the context he taught in generally when he's talking about society and social things. Just often still following or using, you could say, the stereotypes of that period, that there is the capacity or a tendency for women to be envious or to have these traits. And so the Buddha was pointing to them as a teaching method, to say, be careful of these traits. These things can come up, and they come up because of, being unskillful. So that's the whole, if you look at how the teachings are presented, mainly to lay people regarding the results in the future of karma that you do, actions that you do now. So they're generally presenting in order to warn people, if you behave like this, you get this result. If you do this, you get this unwholesome result. If you do this, you do this unwholesome result. So how the Buddha presented it is saying, okay, for women, you have to be careful about this thing, so that all the female listeners would pay attention and say, okay, we don't want this and this and this result. Then there are other areas which are maybe more applied to men, talking about precepts, maybe talking about alcohol and these kinds of things. So as to why the Buddha presented teachings in certain ways at certain times, I just don't know. And of course it's true, it feels a bit uncomfortable, like misrepresenting or creating a perception of women as having particularly negative traits and being an unfavorable kind of destination of rebirth. We always come back to the main point. The important point is that regarding liberation and regarding training the mind, is that everyone, if you take on the teachings very clearly and you avoid unskillful actions, whether you're a woman or a man, and you cultivate the skillful actions, then whether it's this life or next life, then your future will be a happy one, a favorable one, enlightenment, whatever. And so that's, I think, the more important point. These issues, these kind of particular questions, they're still in the realm of speculation. The most important point is for all of us to take on all of the principles, the teachings, whether they're given to a woman or to a man, and to say, well, these are unwholesome traits, and I have to avoid them for this life, for the next life, and for all successive ones. And more importantly, as I said, this year, consider it that actually you want to just really focus on what should you develop for the purpose of your mindfulness practice. And keep your, I would say, questioning or your reading of the Dhamma. It's good to read around, to read the suttas, see it as Indian context, the times, a particular teaching that the Buddha taught. We can't understand why. I wouldn't worry too much about that. Just focus on the things that you actually can practice. So we say it's like ortho practice, right practice, rather than worrying too much about every aspect of the teachings. So it's not a very satisfactory answer, but I just can't answer it very satisfactorily. There's always going to be dukkha around scriptures, teachings 2,500 years ago. And yeah, to say, why did the Buddha teach that in that way is really, really difficult to say. But don't do any of those things and don't get any of those, women and men, it's very clear what to avoid.